Hello, I'm Ken Hampshire, the product formulator for Syntratech Corporation, Denver, Colorado. I'm speaking to you today from my home office about a very important topic, type 2 diabetes and the myths surrounding it. I've had the chance over the last 11 years to talk and work with thousands of chronic type 2 diabetics about their personal situations and what's worked for them. I'll be bringing much of that important information to you over the next 45 minutes to an hour. But before we get started, let me just mention that I'll be changing to a full slide mode here momentarily, so don't be too surprised when you see my image disappear from your screen. Let's get started. I want you to notice in the upper right-hand corner of the slide in front of us that there is a bottle called Syntra 5. This is the dietary supplement which we developed some 11 years ago to help normalize blood glucose. The two booklets you see on either side of this bottle are two clinical studies which we conducted over the last 4 or 5 years. The one on the left is a human clinical trial, and where we measured the effectiveness of Syntra 5 with 50 people, or actually 100 people, 50 in a placebo group and 50 in the active group, a fully double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled human clinical. The results of this study were profound and positive, and the results can be seen on our website, which is www.syntratech.com, here under the name of our company on the left side of your screen. The other booklet is a report of a murine or mouse study which we completed in San Antonio, Texas just last year, where we compared the effectiveness of Syntra 5 to the 3 leading pharmaceutical medications in the country, notably metformin, Actos, and Byetta. And this was a head-to-head comparison. And just to let you know, measuring some 27 different biological markers, Syntra 5 was shown to be superior in alleviating the symptoms of type 2 diabetes than any one of the medications. These are some of the other products that we offer, but we won't be spending time on those today. We'd like to focus rather on Syntra 5 and type 2 diabetes. Diabetes, no big deal, right? I mean, this isn't as severe or serious as type 1 diabetes. Well, while there might be some truth to that statement, type 2 diabetes is certainly something to be concerned with, not only individually, but as a nation, because type 2 diabetes has increased some 700% in the last 50 years in this country and in many countries around the world. You can see in this little map right here, these are some of the countries that have the highest rates of diabetes in the world. The darker the color, the higher the incidence of diabetes. Back in our country, we find that there are over 25 million, almost 26 million diagnosed type 2 diabetics in the country, some 80 million people with what's called prediabetes. These are many of the symptoms leading up to diabetes, and also symptoms that in and of themselves can create long-term health challenges, serious health challenges. Slightly more men than women have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and certainly the minorities are running a much higher percentage rate than either the Caucasian or Asian Americans. Diabetes is the 3rd largest cause of death in this country, only following heart disease, which is the #1 killer in cancer. And the total cost, the direct and indirect costs of diabetes to the United States right now runs in excess of $200 billion. Keep in mind, these are all numbers from 2007, the most recent statistics that we have available. Diabetes is currently the leading cause of amputations of lower body extremities and the leading cause of blindness among adults. So yes, this is a very serious situation. When I talk to people, I ask them some questions to try to introduce them to the major topics of our discussion. And so I will ask you the same question. Have you been told that diabetes is incurable? That it's progressive, it'll always get worse? Or that you'll have to take diabetic medications for the rest of your life? Have you been told you'll eventually have to take insulin whether you want to or not? And despite your best efforts, is your blood glucose still going up? Are you gaining weight? Are you feeling the numbness and tingling, which are some of the early warning signs of diabetes? And are your medications being increased or added one on top of the other? Do you feel that regardless of what you do, nothing seems to work? Does that leave you feeling out of control and defeated? Well, the answer, I think, to that most of the time is yes. And that's where this phrase comes from. You see, this is the phrase I use to describe most of the people I talk to. These are people that have worked with their doctors, their dietitians over the years, months or years. They've done everything that they're told to do, everything they're supposed to do, and yet their diabetes continues to worsen. And so they look for an alternative, and they search on the internet, and eventually they find me, and I get a phone call. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're not alone, because almost every type 2 diabetic is in the same situation, and it's not a very pretty sight. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. I want now to address some of the major myths surrounding type 2 diabetes. And you say, Ken, how do you know this is a myth? Well, I know it's a myth, even though it contradicts what you may have been told and what you may actually believe, because I've seen it disproven in the scientific literature. It's been disproven when used against a measurement of common logic. And we've seen it, many of these myths disproved in large scientific studies conducted all over the world, which we'll be taking a look at in a few minutes. I'm here to tell you today that diabetes is not a real disease. It's not a real disease. You say, what? Of course it's a disease. Well, no, not really. Diabetes would more accurately be labeled a disorder. But to call diabetes as a disease is one of the biggest disservices a medical professional can do to you, a type 2 diabetic. Look, we all know what diseases are. Smallpox, measles, mumps, typhus. These are diseases. A disease happens when a microbe enters our body, causing a set of symptoms which we then label a particular disease. We didn't have any choice in the matter. But you see, diabetes is different than that. We didn't just pick up diabetes walking down the street last week. You see, diabetes doesn't just happen to us. Diabetes happens to us only when we do things which allow it to manifest. So it isn't like a real disease. Now you may ask, why in the world are you getting so tied up with this whole question of a disease or not discussion? Well, it's very important because if you allow yourself to believe that your diabetes is a disease, a real disease, then you have excused your own sense of responsibility in your own disorder. Because after all, we know that you're not responsible for a disease. A disease happens to you. It's not your fault. So you can't be held responsible. If you allow yourself to believe that diabetes is a disease, you remove the biggest ally in your fight to regain your health that you have available, and that's you. So I want you to stand back a little bit, take a deep breath, and try to understand that you cannot and must not allow yourself to believe that diabetes is a disease. It is not. Diseases happen to us. Diabetes didn't just happen to you. I often hear that, Ken, I understand that many other people contribute to their own diabetes, but in my case, it's largely genetic because my mom and dad both had diabetes. My grandmother died of type 2 diabetes, my aunt, my uncle, whatever the case may be. Well, I'm here to tell you, genetics play a very small role in diabetes. Sure, there's a predisposition if you have certain genetic makeup, but it's a very, very small component. Diabetes has increased over 700% in the last 50 years. So it can't be genetic. Genetic changes can't happen that fast. So try to get that excuse out of your mind. Genetics is used by a lot of type 2 diabetics to take themselves off the hook. Well, I'm here to try to put you back on the hook. Because until that happens, you will be destined to follow the same path that millions of other diabetics in this country and around the world are following. And I don't think you want that.